You're beautiful, smile, you're beautiful.
Welcome to the Mindset Great podcast, a show for midlife professional women who want to rediscover their confidence so they can change their lives personally and professionally. If you're an action taker who is ambitious, goal-oriented, and driven, this podcast is for you. Our conversations are going to walk through the latest strategies to build your confidence, identify your goals, discover your passions, and mindset tools to allow you more time and freedom to live the life you want. I am your host, Michelle Barris, retired police sergeant, small business owner, current registered nurse, turned certified women's empowerment coach, and founder of The Great Method and the Mindset Great podcast. More importantly, I'm on a mission to change one woman at a time. Join me each week as we engage in topics and conversations with empowering women just like you. I offer corporate-based workshops and one-on-one coaching. Let's break through the barriers of imposter syndrome and rediscover your confidence to change your life personally and professionally. So sit back, grab a pen and paper to take notes, and let's dive in.
Right. It's never too early or late to start, to rise up and shine.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Mindset Great podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of speaking with Susie Tomenchok about how negotiation is a valuable life skill that you need to accelerate your career and your goals. So grab a pen and paper to take notes because you're not going to want to miss a thing today. Susie, welcome to the Mindset Great podcast. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you. I love, especially an audience of really great women. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. So let's get right on into it. Tell me, how did you get started in coaching, and what is Susie all about?
Yeah. So I was in a corporate role for 10 years plus in the telecom industry. And the way I got into coaching was I just had people tell me that I had an innate way of telling people what they needed to hear at the time that they could hear it. And so it took me a long time to finally believe and, lean into that superpower of mine. And so just over a year ago, I went full time in doing executive coaching and team facilitation. And I think also you just get to a point in your career or maybe your age. I remember people when I was younger saying, "Oh, I feel so comfortable being at this age or this age." And I used to think, "Oh, you're rationalizing being old." But now that I'm there, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I feel really good about giving back and wanting to be a part of really giving to a community or to people and making a difference." And so that's kind of where I am now. And I really enjoy the coaching. And as a part of what I did professionally as a negotiator, doing a lot of deals, I just learned that negotiation happens all over. So I have a passion around helping people advocate for themselves and learning how to lean in so they opt in instead of opt out in opportunities. So that's kind of is that a good enough backdrop?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So I love that you had people telling you that you had this ability to communicate, because I think that so often people observe us from the exterior looking in and they can see our strengths that we think are just our genuine niceness of giving back to people and making it, paying it forward. And so I'm glad to see that you were able to listen to them and really capitalize on moving forward with that. So what was your background was in the corporate world and doing negotiation. So did it seem like a natural flow to just start coaching? Are you doing women or both men and women?
I do both men and women. I did a side hustle. I worked after I left a corporate role. I did some consulting and I worked as a startup and kind of had a side hustle and did it, and just started realizing that people said I lit up when I talked about that business in comparison to some of the other things I was doing. And so just hearing that and seeing and feeling that and having people tell me that's pretty cool. And then that just led me, once you really jump in with both feet and then you're like, I'm doing this, it's real. I think that just brings this energy about you, and people like, oh yes, I want to be a part of that too. So I work with men and women in a lot of different industries, just actually through my network and extended beyond that. But yeah, just making impact is the thing for me.
So how long were you in the corporate world before you left?
So over 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah, and in a lot of different areas in operations and then in sales and in biz dev. And so it was quite a long career, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot and was surrounded by some characters that I tell stories about now. So it all
Right.
worked out.
Very good. So, because predominantly we talked before we actually started our segment today about the listeners that I have on, and a lot of women reach out to me in their mid 40s, early 50s, and they're wondering, what can I do now? My kids are grown, they're out of the house.
Yeah.
I have no idea what to do. And I think that's where the art of finding a coach and someone that you can relate
Mhm.
to can really help a person hone in on those abilities. So when you
Mhm.
do executive coaching, women looking for you or men looking for you, are they high corporate figures within companies, or how are they finding you and to know that you're their coach?
Yeah, it's usually it tends to be senior people just because I left a senior role. And sometimes it is people that are looking for their next thing. And one of the things, to me, the negotiation and the coaching like kind of intersect. And I really believe that we need to advocate for ourselves. And people often think about that meaning I need to make sure, like all of a sudden they're in this situation and this flag comes up. Now you must advocate for yourself. But it really comes from a point of thinking about what do you want next and asking that question and spending time thinking about what's my next challenge, whether it's I want to speak for the senior team, or I want to lead this project, or I need this next position, or I want to work in another company, or I want to work on my own. If we don't ask those questions of ourselves, we're not creating the pathway to get us there. So when we create that intention, that kind of pushes us in that direction,
Right.
but also it helps us kind of operationalize what are the steps that we need to take to get there. And I think that that's where women just stereotypically, we have our families and we have all these other things that are really important to us and we prioritize, and we often don't prioritize, or we don't put ourselves at the higher part of that priority list, and we need to carve out that time to really think about where we're going and advocating for ourselves in a way that
Right.
honors who we are.
And why do you think women do that? Why do you think that we consider ourselves last?
There is research around, and it is related to negotiation, but when they look at gender, the way that women are, even in this day and age, they are expected to do the right thing for the family and to provide. And if you deliver, you'll be noticed and
Right.
you'll be recognized. And where men tend to, as they were brought up, and this is very stereotypical. I have men that say, that's not me. I'm on the other side of that, but tend to wash the car or mow the lawn and were given an extra $5 beyond their allowance, or they just realize that it's a game, that they're more open to it, where women tend to not like that.
Mhm.
And family comes first, or what their needs of the people around them. The studies show that women are great negotiators for their team and when they advocate for people around them. And I think that's true just in general in our leadership and how we advocate. We tend to think of the needs of the people around us and the priorities around us. And we just expect people to say, you're amazing. Here, let me give this to you. But we need to ask for it and be comfortable with that as well.
Right. And I love that you say that we need to ask for it and feel comfortable, because it's
Mhm.
it's powerful to know what you want. It's even more powerful to actually ask for what you want. So
Mhm.
what advice would a woman who is afraid to speak up and ask for what she wants. I mean, she's obviously, especially in the corporate world, and she's a senior level, she's obviously gotten there by doing something correct. So at some point in time, you have to ask for that next step. So what advice do you give to those women when they are like, I want to ask, but what if they say no? Or what if,
Yeah.
what's the worst that can happen?
Wow. I wish there was a silver bullet that I could give you, but I think it is pushing through no. I think we tend to have a negative relationship with no. In fact, the research shows that people don't like to say no, but we assume that people like to say no. And
Right.
even when you just think about that, people like to say yes. And we're surprised in many studies that that when you push through, people are trying to say yes. So changing our relationship with no is one thing, since you said that. And also just asking, like taking a step back and saying, what do I want? And creating courage for ourselves, because it's not always easy. It's easy to say, it's really hard to do. And it feels very lonely, and we don't feel worthy, and it's not the right time. And we tend to think of as many excuses as we can just so we don't have to. But being uncomfortable and really pushing through and kind of living a little bit more on the edge and seeing what's possible, I think, why not?
Right.
If you can get comfortable with that no, or if you get a no, at least you know where you stand. Because then maybe you can ask why, and then that's when those questions come up. That's when you get out of curiosity. Well, help me understand what are the conditions that I need to get to the next level, or seeding ideas. If hey, go to your boss and say, listen, I have been doing stellar work. I've gotten this done and this done, and these are my numbers. I really want to get to this next level. So what is it going to take? And then see what they say. You're seeding these ideas. So find the way that sociologically it feels really comfortable for you,
Right.
and take that path to get yourself beyond your comfort.
When you talk to me, Susie, about why it's important that someone have a coach, which will actually help to facilitate someone being confident enough to have the conversation piece of the negotiation with your boss to plant those seeds.
Yeah. I think it's really important to have somebody that has objectivity and your best interests in mind. You can pick somebody that's in your, your close knit network, but they have emotions involved, and they have a bias. When you have somebody from the outside, they can help you see it in a different way and keep you objective along the way, because that first ask is hard, but you need to stay in the game. We tend to go for the ask. Okay, we've checked the box. We asked, they said no. I'm going to go back to my comfort seat, where you need to continue to be a part of that. And so having somebody on the outside can help you stay objective in that. And when you're like, oh, I don't want to do this, like giving you that confidence to move forward. And also to see, is it the right time? Because sometimes, even if you're the best negotiator in the world, you're not going to get something in a place that they're not going to say yes. So you also have to understand the conditions that you're going in, not make it an excuse, but find out what are the other ways, maybe the path that somebody else has taken before you. I'll give you an example. I worked with a woman recently who was a VP who moved to SVP. She's a good friend of mine. And she called me and I said, why don't you go to the other people that got SVP and ask them how they did it first, then go to HR, and just out of curiosity, like, what does the people need to go the next step, so that when you go to your boss and ask for it, you can say, well, this is help them with the roadmap, especially when they're not maybe the one that can say that they can make the decision in that moment. Help them with the roadmap and help them see, I've done my due diligence without, you got to be careful. You don't want them to feel threatened, but as long as you can position it in a way that says, I really want this, and I'm really good and I deserve it. So here's the pathway to success. And how can I help you? How can we get me there? How can we do that together?
I think that is amazing. And I wish that because I come from a career of law enforcement. I wish that in the career of law enforcement, the mentoring, and that was one thing that I was really struggling with when I left, was that the mentoring and the leadership and that career mapping just wasn't there. It was a lot of politics. It was a lot of BS that you just didn't want to have to deal with at the end of the day. And I'm hopeful that the future of law enforcement, and that women in law enforcement specifically, will be able to change that so that it can be created to show that just because you're best friends with the chief's son doesn't mean that you're going to be promoted, but you're actually doing things because you have earned your spot being there, because you know the position, not because you know someone to get you there. And I really hope that that happens. And I know that in the corporate world, I didn't realize how much it happened until I actually left the police world. I didn't realize how advantageous it was to actually be able to speak up for your actions and to be able to facilitate that growth within a community. So I commend you. I think that's great that you're able to see that with a person as well. Can you tell me about your career level up women's professional program that you offer? Because I think that kind of flows nicely with the negotiation of how things are moving about in your everyday life. And what is that program for women?
Yeah, I was fortunate to be, when I was in corporate, they put you in a very prestigious leadership group that I met women that I'm still friends with and I travel with, and really, really depend on, that represent a lot of different areas of the industry. And I love that community. And the fact that I also was negotiating at such a high level, I knew great people, this huge network of people. And I was talking to a friend of mine that's a COO of Make-A-Wish Atlanta. And I was like literally walking in my backyard. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so fortunate that she's my girlfriend. And it just like aha moment was like, oh, how can I share this with others? Combine my experience with the leadership program that I was in, where I created community. And I believe that as professionals, we need to invest in ourselves in order to level up. So that's kind of everything kind of, put all together. I put together this cohort, and it's a 12-week program. We do 6 different modules around finding your vision. How do you give and receive feedback? A little bit around negotiation and advocating for yourself, mapping out your network, internal and external, and building that influence. And every month I also bring in one of my friends. They're just my friends. And I talk to them in a really candid way about their journey and their experience for this community. And my vision is truly to bring together just this, keep growing these cohorts in a way that can provide this community of trusted, you could pick up the phone and call anybody in this career level up community and be there for one another, because I believe that women aren't great at advocating for one another.
100%.
They say it and they don't do it.
I think you just made a t-shirt.
Yes, you're right. They say it and they don't do it. Yes. Such a catchphrase, but men, and I learned it when I was at the startup too, is I was in this great leadership network, and I would see the women kind of go, can you write me a great email that has all this stuff in it, and I'll forward it on. And where the guys would tend to go, your technology is really cool. I'll get the meeting and I'll sit in it with you.
Right.
And just that nuance of that different approach, it was just like, oh my gosh, like, come on. Maybe you don't know how. We need to learn to like, how do we help one another? So that's kind of where it came from, to change that.
Well,
So
I love it. How do people find more information about that specifically? You said it's a 12-week. Is it, so it's an in-person event, or?
It's all virtual right now.
Okay.
And it's weekly. We meet once a week. It's just an hour. We go through all those, and it's really about that community. I also put people in smaller accountability groups, because that even deepens that relationship. Next one starts in April. It's on my website.
I want to talk about your book, because I am in awe that you wrote a book, and The Art of Everyday Negotiation and Manipulation. Did you obviously you were living this and doing this every day.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about that for those who haven't gotten a copy, but will after you tell them this very important message. And I can
Yes,
see it in the background for those of us who are
it is.
watching.
It's
I
right
see
there.
it there.
Well placed,
Well, it
not
is.
by accident.
Very
I have to be
well.
honest. Without manipulation, it's art of negotiation, everyday negotiation. And so I was doing these big business deals, and honestly, I just had to figure it out. It was, they put me in front of them, and I was closing them. And it was because of my personality. I kind of figured it out and had to really then start paying attention and getting some other help and really understanding all the ins and outs of really being a true negotiator, because I was acting like one and people started acting like I was too. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like such a fake. And then I have three girls. They're all now in their 20s. They're all professionals now. But back in the day, I would start seeing them. I in my book I talk about the Target strategy, going shopping in Target, and literally them using timing, relationship equity, making the ask, knowing exactly, bringing two things to me. I mean, they didn't tell me until they were teenagers that they had been doing this to me for years. And just that aha moment that it's everywhere and it happens to us all the time. It's like this third dimension. We better pay attention because we might not realize. And also my own experience of in my corporate world, seeing, my coach told me one time I had gotten an office, and my peer Dean got a similar office, big, overlooking the mountains, very prestigious on executive row, but Dean's was at the end of the hall. And my coach said, you need to ask for the corner office. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to ask for the corner office. And basically, long story short, I went and asked. They were like, what are you talking about? We put you closer to us because we like you better than Dean, but we just put him on the end. We thought about it. And my coach said to me, do you know why they did that? They didn't give it to Dean, why they didn't give it to you to start with? Because they knew you were the path of least resistance. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting. I don't want to be the path of least resistance. Just knowing it's happening around you allows you to make the choice of whether to be in or not. And so instead of opting out, I just think it's good for us to opt in, and just understanding some of the sociological things that happen to us that get in our way, how to frame things, and understand, not feeling like negotiation is this icky word, but it's really a professional development tool, skill, techniques that we should all use in our everyday and be better, so that we can, and it comes down to is preparing for conversations, knowing have your end in mind, think about the interests of yourself and others, and how do you get to a win-win? And that's really it.
How does a woman identify if she is one of those that people are assuming is the path of the least resistance? How would a woman listening know, hey, that might be me right there?
Take a minute to think about, what are people getting around you that you aren't? Or is there something that you want that people aren't coming to you? What kind of questions do you get? What do people call you for? What do you get invited to? And kind of thinking about that traction that you create, or that people bring you along for. And it's really understanding your influence that you have within the organization that you're in. And when that's strong, that means you're making an impact. And that a lot of times is a clue to whether you can ask and what influence you have, but are you making traction? Are you doing what you need to do or that you want to do?
Right.
Are those opportunities that you ask for? Are you asking? Do you feel uncomfortable? They say, if you don't ask, if you're not hearing no enough, you're not asking enough. So are you putting yourselves in those situations? So I think just taking a moment to think about that, have some self-reflection, and even ask other people around you, what else should I be doing?
Yeah, I got told probably, I'm going to say 7, maybe 8 years ago, when I was still on the police department, that I was the go-to person because I always got it done and I never said no. And I thought, and I wasn't saying no, it wasn't because I didn't want to do it. It fueled me to actually be able to do it. But realizing by every time I was saying yes, I was putting myself right back at that person of the path of least resistance, because I will get it done versus, someone else who should be doing that portion of their duties versus my own. So
Yeah.
that I definitely can relate to. I'm glad I came out of my shell and opted to start being advocating for myself versus everyone else doing their own advocating for themselves.
And was that because somebody asked you that or pointed that out to you, and that was kind of your aha?
Yeah, it was actually my husband. I had a boss who I respect tremendously. He was an amazing leader. I can't thank him enough for what he did with my career and everything involved in it. But every time he moved into another position, I was the person he called. And I was given the position without the rank that would come along with other people who did those positions, or I was given the responsibility of doing things. And I just thought that's, bide your time. Eventually you'll get there. And yeah, that's kind of how it was. My husband looked at me one day and he goes, "Why do you feel the need to always rescue everyone?" I'm like, "What? I didn't think that's what I was doing. I thought I was just doing my job." And he's like, "No, you're not. You're doing well more than what you should be doing, or way more than you should be doing." Okay, note to self. And when I actually started saying no, and I finally had stood up, I got asked to do a certain position, and I called and I said, I thought about it, given what I'm going through with school and everything else, it's just better for me to not take on this responsibility right now, because I'm 110% committed on something. And if I can't do that, then I don't want to invest in it.
Yep.
And I think I got more respect out of that one conversation that I probably should have had years ago, and realized that's probably my aha. Oh, wow. I hate to say my husband was right, but he was probably right.
Yeah. It's hard too, because it's hard to hear it from somebody that's really close to you.
Yeah.
We should listen.
Right. And to see, because we see things outsiders see things looking in that because we're so close to it. It's so personal to us that we don't see it. We don't observe it.
No. And we even say it. This really struck me the other day is I always tell women, put your story out there, talk about it. And then I was asked to do the same thing. And I was like, but why me? And I was like, I tell this to people and I still have these voices. We all do. So it's taking that time to appreciate when we've pushed through them, right, and giving ourselves some grace around it, but also identifying that they're around and they're subtle.
Yeah, I was working with a client last week and she said, "Everything's just so perfect in your world always." And I went, "Oh, no. I too have a coach." Exactly. I don't just coach. I too have a coach. In fact, sometimes I have two coaches in 1 year. So it's just a matter of what's going on in my business and in my mind that I need to facilitate it with outsiders looking in versus me taking care of it myself. So don't think that my life is a white picket fence with perfect shutters, because it's definitely not.
Yes, I hear you. I feel the same way.
So what about you have a 2-day negotiation masterclass? Is that to help understand how to negotiate, or what is that about?
Yeah, it's that idea of we go through some of the strategies that are like the MBA kind of things, like framing and anchoring and what they mean and BATNA. We talk about what those are and how to use them to get them just really comfortable with those terms and what they mean, and my framework around prepare, aware, close, and evaluate. And then we look at some of the sociological research around emotion and personality and positive versus negative. And I think it just gives you, it's an immersive, so it's not an end all, everything, but it makes you really think about, oh, that's interesting. I never really thought about negotiation that way. I need to think and lean in more in that. And this is how this applies to me. And I need to start practicing silence more, or I need to ask more. So it kind of it's that first step in that awareness. I really believe it's an awareness. And once you see it, then you're just that much better, because you have that, you have more intention around it. So that's what it's about. It's fun. It's a really fun, you have a workbook and it's very interactive.
So those are virtual 8-hour days that you're spending with each other, or how does that work out?
Yeah, it's actually 2 half days. So it's not even a huge time investment. And and then a little bit of homework in between. And so there's a workbook around it. You are in some rooms to talk amongst yourselves and sharing kind of that experience. And even that helps you realize that people around you are exploring this or just getting to this aha moment in themselves, and hearing other people's stories about how negotiation shows up in a lot of different ways for all of us.
Yes, I would agree. So I have women listening right now and they're wondering, I'm sure there might be some men too, but it's a women's podcast. So and they're wondering, I need a little Susie in my life. How do they connect with Susie? And what one piece of advice do you try to leave with someone to say, this is why you need Susie in your life, or a Susie in your life?
Thank you for asking me that. I have a freebie that people can download and you can get on my mailing list. And that's just to give you some ideas of negotiation every day. It's not intended to be a sales thing. It's just putting my voice out there and giving some suggestions and stuff. So that's definitely a route we can go. I think my big thing, especially for women, is really looking at where you need to advocate more for yourself, like taking the time. We make doctor's appointments. Why not make an appointment even twice a year where you think about, where do I want to go next and where do I need to advocate for myself? So making that space for yourself to be a priority would be one thing. And then really questioning, do you ask enough and do you hear no enough? I think those are two things. And then a tactic is silence. Silence, we've always heard silence allows you to understand a lot more that's going on in the other person's head because they can't stop from sharing more. But it also is a way to honor the other person and let them be heard, and really practicing that awkward silence to see what comes up for you and other people. Mm-hmm. So I think that's my, that's a party favorite, especially practicing silence with people that we are around all the time. They say that we listen the least to the people we know because we're so used to what they say and their cadence and everything. So practicing silence can interrupt that and make us more attentive for the people that we really care most about.
Absolutely. Or the people we care most about, we assume what they're already going to say, and they'll say something completely different, and we'll respond with what we thought they were going to say. And they look at us and go, you weren't listening to a word I was just saying.
Yeah, it's true.
I'm guilty of this.
Me too.
I do need to practice more silence. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to get on and talk with us today and offer the information. I'll have a link in the show notes as well for your book so people can go and purchase that and hopefully gets connected with you. I know that I have some corporate women specifically, and they know who I'm talking about when I say this, because we have a big company here in town. And I think that connecting with you would be something great that they should be doing. So I know, wink, wink, that they know who I'm talking about when I say this, because they're pretty weekly listeners to me, and they'll send me a message going, you were talking about me. I'm like, yes, I'm talking about you. So thank you so much for coming on, and have a great day.
Same to you. Thank you so much.
Your beautiful smile, your beautiful life.
Thanks for listening to the Mindset Great podcast. If you've been loving this podcast and it is helping you approach your life and career in a brand new way, I have 3 requests / small favors. Number 1, make sure you hit subscribe so you're getting all the latest episodes to this podcast. Go ahead, I'll wait. Do it right now so you don't miss anything. Number 2, would you be so kind as to give me a review on Spotify or iTunes? Reviews help other professional, career-driven, and highly skilled women just like you find this podcast, and it lets them know they don't want to miss anything. It also helps the podcast climb in rankings, so think of it as empowering women to the top, paying it forward. And number 3, please join our Facebook group, Mindset Great Coaching. It is only for professional women and only those who are serious about changing their lives. If you're ready to take massive action and invest in yourself and your career, I would be honored to help you. Head on over to the Facebook group and let's get connected. Until next time, allow yourself grace and be beautiful.
Rise up and shine. With every morning comes a new chance to start over. Every day is a treasure.